On September 26th of last year, after months of silence post-shutdown of Shatterline, the devs released a new Randy DLC for the game. And yes, that makes this review video long overdue, but since the Randy DLC seems to be able to be purchased for the foreseeable future, I figure it's about time to talk about it. So, what is Shatterline's Randy DLC, formerly known as Dead Card? Well, who better to explain it than the devs themselves? When the DLC launched, as you can see by this message, Andre, who is one of the leaders of the Frag Lab team responsible for producing this DLC, states that Randy is a new single-player DLC for Shatterline on Steam. In it, you navigate a dark underground labyrinth on a moving platform powered by an AI named Randy. Scavenge batteries, grenades, and traps to survive lab monstrosities and find an exit. Horror plus escape vibes. He then goes on to explain what it is. Essentially, the core loop is that you are riding with Randy, your AI cart/platform, and you need to keep it powered with batteries you find in the bunkers. You also discover grenades and traps to stall pursuing monsters, and the main goal is to escape the labyrinth, while every detour risks power drain versus better gear. And it represents a clear departure from the main campaign, as it is more dark, tense, and different compared to the normal story. And then this part is actually the most important. They say why we made it. We wanted to try a tighter, systems-driven solo experience. Less run and gun, shooter, more resource-managed survival with a bit of personality. Quote, Randy has opinions. Now that I've laid out what this DLC is and what it was trying to accomplish, let's go over how well it succeeded and whether or not it's worth your time and money to play it. But before that, let's just go over some quick facts. So this DLC is available only on PC. It's not available on PlayStation as far as I know, yet it could come in the future. It is also exclusively single player, meaning you can't do co-op, or it was never designed for co-op like many of the other missions were for the campaign. And finally, it is exclusively playable offline, so you don't have to connect to the servers or do anything really. You just have to be online to download the game, obviously, but then you can play it offline. As of now, the base price for the DLC is $5 USD, and recently it was on sale for $3.50, so they are willing to put it on sale, and I will take that into account when I give my final evaluation. You can also buy a combination that includes the full campaign as well as the DLC for $12 total, which that ends up meaning that the DLC is like $2 in cost, because the regular campaign by itself is $10 on Steam. So if you buy both and you get it from $12, then you can get it cheaper that way too. But anyways, I'll stop rambling about facts and let's get into the actual gameplay. At face value, this mode seems kind of cool. You have to scavenge around for resources, barely scrape by, try and survive against zombies or monster enemies, and ultimately escape from this underground bunker. And I think that's one of the things that this DLC did really well, which was the atmosphere, the environment, the tone, the dark humor, and the dark feeling that you don't really get from the normal game. It's a lot more intense feeling, it's not as light, it's not as fast paced, so they definitely achieved a different vibe. There is a very clear contrast created between the high octane run and gun experience of the main campaign with lots of fast paced action versus this more slower paced, scavenge around, fight for resources, and dark environment created with the DLC. So as far as tone, I would give them a lot of credit. It does do exactly what they wanted to accomplish, which was a more dark, tense, and different environment. There were also some highlights from the gameplay that I really enjoyed, like the cart flying over the gap or the sliding puzzle towards the end of part 3. I feel like those options were a little bit different, and they really used the cart in a way that was unique, and we hadn't seen that before in the main campaign. And as for my experience, I didn't have a single soft lock or bug issue, but I have heard other people say that there have been some issues, so maybe they've been refined out over the past few months, or maybe I just got lucky. But all I can say is I never had an instance of having to quit out and restart because something wasn't working. The entirety of the DLC is also only about 90 minutes in gameplay, and that was me playing it pretty slow and actually exploring every part of the labyrinth. So if you speed through it, it could be closer to an hour. If you take even more time, it could be around 2 hours, but I would say around 90 minutes is the length of the DLC. So for me, it felt nice because I could finish it in one sitting and it wasn't overbearing. But I know for some people, they may want something that's a little bit longer to really sink their teeth into and get more out of the experience. So now I've gone over the main positives of this DLC, which is that it has a good atmosphere, it's relatively cheap, it's relatively short, it has a few interesting moments, it's mostly bug-free, and it definitely accomplishes the atmosphere aspect that the devs were trying to go for. However, we also have to talk about the bad, and oh boy, is there a lot of bad. Let me just read a few of the Steam reviews to sort of situate some context before I give my breakdown of what I experienced personally. As we can see, the DLC is currently sitting on Steam with 14 total reviews, only one of which is positive, so there definitely has to be some issues that people are discussing. For example, one user describes it as a dreadful experience from start to finish. Another person says, overall horrible DLC. I only got it because I'm a completionist and it was on a Steam sale, but it is truly bad. It's very repetitive and is only 3 extra levels that change the game from PvP/PvE to a horror game. The story overall is bad in my opinion too. Total is about 1 hour 30 to 2 hours of content. Would not recommend buying this cash grab. And we see here the most popular and honestly my favorite review. This person says, Shatterline is truly living up to its name with this quote-unquote DLC. I refuse to believe anyone played this internally and said, yes, this is fun and worth money. If you liked any of the aspects of the old version, like the movement or the shooting, this quote-unquote DLC does not have any of that until mid-second mission, which I'm currently stuck on because the card has bugged out and refuses to move. Can't interact with any of the arrows on the touchpad. Thought I'd give them some money after having spent 1,000 hours playing for free, but this DLC killed any good faith I had left in FragLab LLC. There's some more negative comments in this review that you can go read yourself if you feel like it, but I think the main sentiment here is that this DLC took a huge diversion from the main game and what attracted people to the main game and flipped that on its head. And now you're getting reviews like this where people are just not happy because they came to Shatterline for a certain experience and this DLC is totally different. I would also like to include some positive reviews here, but there just isn't any. There's only one positive review on Steam so far, and it's from one guy that just says yes. So not too much we can gain from there, but like I mentioned before, there are some positive aspects. So what did I personally experience whenever I played through the DLC this past weekend? My first note was that the gameplay is just overall incredibly boring. If you want high octane shooting, action, stuff blowing up, running from monsters, it's just not it. I mean, this DLC, you are very slowly walking around, very slowly gathering materials for your cart or gathering weapons or abilities, and most of the time you're just wandering through empty caverns and not doing much at all. Another thing I picked up on is that the voice lines are incredibly repetitive. I mean, after every single thing, it was the same voice lines over and over and over again. You would pick up a battery and it would say the same thing over and over and over again. It just got very repetitive. Even in only an hour and a half long thing, they could have switched it up a little bit, you know.
Left symbol unlocked. One step closer to whatever's behind that charming and not at all ominous door.
And on top of the repetitive voice lines, the gameplay itself is also very repetitive. You basically had one objective, which is to collect a battery, bring it back to the cart, move forward a little bit, collect another battery, bring it back to the cart, and rinse and repeat over and over again until you made it to the end of the level. There was never any sort of other option to do. You just either put in a battery to power your cart forward, or you put in a battery to unlock the door in front of you. I guess you could say there's also some doors in the gameplay where you have to enter a code, but even that was used so much that it also became very repetitive. Another issue I had was that my fourth ability slot just didn't work at all. I don't know if this was an issue with maybe my keybinds or something in the back end, but whenever I would get my fourth ability, I just could not use it at all, even when I desperately needed to. Another thing that heavily disappointed me was the sheer lack of gunplay. There was only one gun present throughout the entire 3-part DLC, and that being the Culverina, and you couldn't even put attachments on it, and you were given very limited ammo. Now I get that they wanted this to feel hardcore and like you needed to scavenge for everything, but the highlight of Shatterline is the gunplay for many people. So not including any other guns besides the Culverina feels like it fell very short of what it could have been. The movement also got very annoying very quickly. You were basically walking on one leg, hobbling around through the tunnels. It felt very slow compared to the fast-paced version in the campaign or even PvP, where you have dash, you have sprint, you have b-hop, long jump, other movement options. In this DLC you have nothing. It's all restricted. You must move very slow, and you must move at that pace throughout your entire journey. There's no way to speed it up. And to me, that kind of gets away from what Shatterline is or what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be this run and gun, high octane experience, but this DLC totally contrasted with that, and it kind of shows what the devs wanted to make more than what Shatterline is and supposed to be good at. I mean, going back to the PvP days where they were constantly removing movement and restricting player movement, we can kind of see from this DLC that that's maybe what they wanted all along, was this slower paced game. Another point is that there's just no operatives, so not only did they take out all the weapons aside from one, they also took out all the operatives and many of the abilities, so you're very limited content-wise with what you can do in the DLC. The DLC also has a large potential, sort of a fatal flaw to completely soft lock and force you to restart your current part. As we can see in this review, I encountered 2 times game-breaking bugs and I had to restart the whole map, and there's no save points. So yeah, if you encounter a bug, or if you misuse your power supply for your cart, then it can easily soft lock and you have to restart, which kind of sucks. They did give a lot of extra fuel around the map, but even so, it doesn't regenerate, so it's still possible to run out of fuel and completely lock yourself in a room. And to top it all off, the main story really made no sense to me. I kind of get what they were trying to go for, like you go for an escape plan and then your ally turns evil at the end and sides with the other AI or something, but by then I was so lost at that point I didn't know what was going on, and by the end of it I'm not even sure if you get out of the bunker or not. It just ends with this vague message about something silent happening, and yeah. So if they were going for an all-inclusive story that really connected, they definitely missed the mark on that, because the main campaign story is already loosely put together. And we could see some references throughout this DLC to the main campaign story, but it wasn't enough to really tie into the Shatterline universe. So as you can see, a lot of people have more bad things than good things to say about it, including myself. Overall, I didn't really have too great of an experience. Granted, it was only a few dollars, so there's that. And there was some positive aspects that I did enjoy, but overall, I definitely would say it's more negative than positive, and it ultimately falls short of what is laid out in the description and what one would envision whenever they read about a scavenge horror style game, because it doesn't really even have any horror elements. It's just a dark environment, but by the end of the DLC, nothing ever ends up happening. Like there's this main enemy boss guy that you don't even end up encountering after. He just appears and then disappears. And he was built up to be this main enemy, and nothing happens with him. So I don't know what, maybe there's going to be a part 2 or part 3. I really hope not. But for me, a lot of it just did not flow together at all. And that's why I would have to say it's more negative than positive aspects. If I had to describe the DLC to someone who had played a lot of the Shatterline PvE, specifically Expedition, I would say it's a combination of the Horror Maze dungeon in the lake section of the Expedition map and a strafer bunker put together. So think of it as a really long strafer bunker with all of those assets, but you have the movement that you have in the beginning of Horror Maze, and there's more of a darker tone associated with it. So very slow movement, very long sections of nothingness, but you do have to scavenge for your loot, and eventually you do encounter some enemies. And that's another thing we can see, is that 95% of the DLC is just copy and paste reused assets from older versions of the game. So if you're expecting completely new stuff, it's just not here. It would take them much longer to put out fresh content for a DLC like this if they were actually using new assets. Now personally, I don't really mind if they copy and paste stuff over, but I know it can be a sign of low effort if everything is just reused assets and nothing is new or creative or fresh or brings anything new to the overall experience. So all that said, I would give the DLC like a 3 or 4 out of 10. If it was free, I would say sure, why not? If you have an hour and a half, just play through it. You're probably not going to like it, but if you're a Shatterline person, maybe you'll get some enjoyment out of it. Otherwise, save your money, don't buy it unless you just absolutely have to play it. But as you can see from all the reviews and kind of what I've gone over, it just does not appeal to the Shatterline crowd whatsoever. Now, I will say if this was a standalone game that was longer, had a more fleshed out story, had an actual ending, and not just whatever that was with some text on the screen, then it could be something. Like, I do like the atmosphere, I do like the vibe, I do like the scavenging. I like what they were going for, but I think it was half-baked, poor execution, and frankly rushed. So if they had gone about it differently and maybe turned it into its own game with substantial depth and more varied activities, it could have been something good, but in the current state, it's just not worth your money. But with that all said, I hope you enjoyed this review, hope you learned something, hope you check out Randy if you still feel like it after everything I've gone over, and I hope you do enjoy it, because just because I didn't enjoy it doesn't mean nobody else can either. So once again, I am incredibly underwhelmed by Frag Lab's performance, but hey, at least they released something, you know. And I do appreciate the fact that they've turned on multiplayer servers and made the PvP more accessible for everyone. So we are headed in the right direction with community hosted servers, and even Frag Lab's hosting some servers as of right now. So I do like that they're doing that. They're not letting the game go to complete rubble, but as for this DLC, I think they missed the mark. But anyways, that's all from me. Let me know what you think about the Randy DLC if you've had a chance to play it in the comments below. And other than that, I'll see you later.